We're joining the second open source community call on our sharealedger.org approach to things. I reviewed last Monday's meeting and thoughtful responses and discussions. So today, Rakesh, you had suggested we work on a vision statement.
Right.
I kind of started to draft this and thought I would have good, better, best, but it didn't turn out that way. So let me just go through and read to you what I've drafted and get your responses back here. I think our sharealedger.org should have a data focus, interoperability focus, and accessibility focus. So data focus, existing financial system technologies are based upon computing capacities and capabilities available 30 to 40 years ago. This project will move shared ledger concepts beyond blockchain's trustlessness and data agnostic role to create an industry basis for a shared ERP environment at cost-effective scale, starting with general ledger at the core.
Yeah.
Creating,
I'm
go
sorry.
ahead.
I think the beyond blockchain's trustlessness. I think let's not be kind of
Negative,
negative and also
pejorative.
yeah pejorative. I think,
Good.
and then also blockchains. The jury is still out there whether people can trust or not trust. But let's just not get into that debate. Yeah.
No, I didn't mean trusting blockchain. It was more that blockchain was built upon a concept of trustlessness.
Yeah.
But your point's valid. Okay, good comment. Creating an initial free service used by individuals and small businesses for sharing ledgers, providing a roadmap for growth to larger businesses and for vendors to provide solutions on top of the offer.
The third point, creating an initial free service used by individual and small businesses for sharing business instead of ledgers, because it sounds like we're kind of making an assumption we're going to share ledgers. Business
Data.
business intelligence or business data. Yeah.
How about building upon blockchain's goals? That's more positive, isn't it? Is that okay? Interoperability. Cryptocurrencies may develop such that, like in the early 1800s in the US, I should add in. With many currencies issued by all types of organizations, individuals and organizations will require multi-currency management capabilities for their financial lives. An opportunity exists to pair these developments with greater efficiencies in financial systems, not less. Standards for application and data will facilitate both these needs. This project will provide a test environment for developing this model with multiple organization participation.
Okay.
And just why the focus on currencies? I mean, I know it's an example, but
that's a good question. Because it's what came to mind as I was drafting this morning, Mike.
It's okay. I mean, I still want. I mean, it's not. That's not the focus. It's one example of interoperability, right?
Yes. So maybe I could phrase it that way, just as an example. Is that okay? Is that useful?
Yeah, I mean, more I'm just trying to get a glimpse into the mind of Kip.
No, I think that's
Is there
good.
something peculiar about currencies or not?
No, I don't think there's something peculiar about it, although I do think it's the cryptocurrencies tied to the blockchain is something that's caused this time. And I think that it's something that is very much lacking in really most of the world's financial management systems today, except for very large organizations that have to deal with it. But I don't know that that's the case. It's a very good comment, Mike, and we could come back to that. I could consider that some, right? Okay, maybe I'll do using currency as an example.
Maybe even just move the bullet down so it's not your lead.
Or maybe move which bullet down?
The cryptocurrency one.
Oh. Okay, so let me come back to that. I appreciate that comment. Okay, let me go to the last one. Digitization of currencies leaves large groups of marginalized individuals further isolated from economic opportunity. The ubiquity and accessibility of computing capacity found in phones could be paired with simple financial management concepts like cash flow, income statement, and balance sheets to enable the smallest merchants in the world to join the digital economy and manage their financial lives more effectively. Such an environment requires scale and scope of today's major data platforms, but because of scale and because of ownership sensitivity, will require a flexible, multi-party shared approach. Let me speak to this last one a little bit. I don't know if you remember, we had dinner at a restaurant with Jeff Wolfers in London, probably in 2007. It must have been in 2006. I don't remember exactly when, because he left in, no, he was around 2007, he left 2008 or 2009. At the dinner, he said, why don't we work on something that really matters? And I thought of that over the years. Why don't we work on something that matters? This last bullet point matters. This is where what we're doing matters in the world, much more than some of the other stuff we might be working on. What's your sense?
Yeah, we are kind of yeah, I think anyway, I think this is good to start. I think this is we'll have the guiding light in front of us in terms of some of the decisions that we make. It needs to be data focused, it needs to be interoperable, and it needs to be accessible. Okay.
Yeah, okay. Mike, I'm going to take your comment on cryptocurrencies, and I'll currency focus and recast that center one in some way. But I'll work on that. Okay?
Okay.
Well, that was a shorter discussion on vision than I thought.
Okay, so there was another thing also, Kip, yesterday we talked about vision and what was else? Anyway, I'm forgetting right now.
That's okay. I mean, we could go back. You've had, we clearly didn't get, we were kind of rushed through some of the stuff I covered last week.
Yeah, and yeah, sure. And I've been thinking about how to start capturing some of this information. And yesterday, the duality kind of kept puzzling me for some time. So I got, as part of the implementation process in FPM, we have sort of a spreadsheet that we use in order to kind of start thinking about the data structure and start thinking about the metadata and reference data, what all is required, and that helps us arrive at the structure and the fields and so on and so forth. So I started kind of filling some of that. So at some point, we can start kind of looking at what does it mean in terms of REA model What are resources? What are events? What are agents? What is duality, and how should that manifest into the structures that we already know and the structures that we probably need to adjust to?
That sounds good. Another topic comes to mind here, Rakesh, just reacting there. A little bit more back to this. I've been thinking perhaps what I could do is to start to develop internal to IBM an open source project proposal.
Yep.
Take this proposal and actually put that out there. I think I like the idea of this structure as we've drafted it here a little bit, because it takes it out of any consideration of multiple organizations are having to contribute to be a part of this, and recognizing, so the share ledger FPEM today is not designed to be a shared ledger.
Nope.
And so this stretches your capabilities and would test you as to what you would be willing to contribute to this idea. And IBM would have the same sorts of contributions going on.
Yeah, I mean, yesterday I was thinking about the same thing, and I think I've reached a conclusion that the underlying platform would not be open source, but the configuration that we arrive together based on journal conversations and whatever we arrive at in terms of structures and reference data and processes and whatever else that is on top of the platform is open source for sure.
Okay.
And then if we need something to be built into the platform in order to accommodate some things that are not there, that we could kind of discuss in terms of whether that's a product development that I would like to take, or how do we want to go about that?
Right. We could end up coming up with components that we view as utility functions that do not have a lot of value to any one party.
Right.
May be shared.
Agreed. Okay.
Okay.
So, what do we want to do? Do you have anything else, or I would like to kind of get to that REA model and kind of think about how should we?
I think that's good. Do you want to share what you did, or do you want to go back to some of these?
No. I'll share
Okay.
some of the things that I was kind of thinking about. Oh, okay, give me a second.
I only had I think there was one other concept that I had that maybe I could, while you're doing that, Rakesh.
Mhm.
There's one other thing that I've been noodling for a couple of years in doing this work. It's kind of, I don't know, maybe this is dumb. When I did this model, I'll do full screen here. This was my model that I built 2 years ago, based upon some of the preliminary thinking about REA and extending FTP's data model for REA. So you have the involved party contract and commitment already in here, and we have the business event, and we have the balances. I inserted something here that's a little bit maybe anachronistic.
Are you sharing something?
Yeah, can you not share my screen? Can you see Rakesh?
I see the deck that's sharealedger.com or sharealedger.org.
Yeah, I see the header and extension concepts.
Oh, header and extension. You don't see that. So Mike, you're a little late in refresh perhaps. Let me turn off my GIF. That might help you increase your...
Guys, my nephew is playing video game and he's kind of talking to his friend behind us. If you hear some voices,
that's good.
Please ignore him.
Does he need some help?
I have already resigned to the fact that I can't help him. He's so good at that age. It just doesn't even register how he moves so fast.
Mike, I don't think you need to see the screen. You'll get the concept pretty easily.
Yeah, what's strange is I see the audio, it says who's speaking and whatnot. So it seems like the connection's live, but it's like a frozen desktop that I'm looking at.
Yeah, okay. Well, and I could let me stop sharing. But the concept here is pretty simple, Mike. I inserted an entity in between the SJE and the commitment entity that I called Universal header. Now, universal header is recognition that in so many business systems, there's a header and lines sort of concept to the data. And I thought maybe we ought to just kind of recognize that fact and consider using that in the data model we're considering, because it just exists all over the place. I had wondered if we could use the same construct to group together multiple lines of data, multiple journal and multiple events, business events, but also use a similar structure if we wanted to group balances together, JSF rows together. But I can't. It's a little bit of a hunch that maybe this would be useful, as opposed to something that's like I can defend academically in some way. So anyway, that was kind of the last topic we didn't discuss last time, Rakesh. That maybe there's some value in thinking of debunking my idea on that.
Okay, I got it. And I think we'll kind of hit some of these topics as I mean, obviously there are two ways kind of think about how we structure this, because I think what I've found is if we do a good job of kind of defining the structures and thought processes around how those structures will hold the information and enable that sharing and sharing at whatever level, depending on how the business requirements are changing or as we're discovering new things.
Yep.
Hey Deva, please, a little bit quiet.
Okay.
So I think as we kind of discuss this, you'll probably see some of that thought process flush out. Okay, so I'm going to share my screen now.
Great. Mhm.
Where are we? Share. Okay, so I'm going to first start with how we should think about in terms of next steps, and then we'll kind of talk about one of those first steps. The very first thing we need to think about is logically, what structures do we need in our shared ledger concept, and what are the fields that are going to be on that before we kind of say the debits and accounting and all of that. So the way, let me write the first step. The first step is defining the, where is that? Hold on. I'm trying to find my, not physical, logical. Oh, here it is. Okay, so so the first step is conceptual. We need to define all the concepts that need to come into play in our shared ledger system. So in order to do that, we need to first hypothesize that what are the kind of concepts we're going to have. And when I say concepts, I mean it in terms of tables, in terms of files, which are a collection of fields. So the first step, my recommendation should be, let's just first figure out what should be the concepts we should have, and we should call that as a conceptual item. And the way I think about it is conceptually, we have to think about what parties, what product, what resource item, arrangement, location, event, classification, conditions that we need to have. Now, in order to think about it, what concepts we have, I kind of looked at your did some study on REA yesterday, Kip, and I'm going to kind of open it up as there are three categories that we're talking about: resource, and if you see where I've highlighted things.
Yep.
Well, so resource, event, and agent. So let's explore each one of them, as obviously these come into play when an event occurs. So let's first focus on an event, and then we'll go to resources.
So just comment, Rakesh, that's focusing more in the accounting plane, It's ignoring the scheduling things that they've added more recently on
No, not scheduling yet. I'm just trying to
Okay.
I'm just trying
That's
to
good.
understand whether it is an accounting or it is scheduling or it is anything else. What would be the
Okay.
structures at play?
Okay, fine.
So if I say let's focus on event first. Let me hide this. So what is truly an event in terms of business processes? In order for an event to occur, we would need something of sort arrangement, because an event needs to have a bearing of where and what it is happening for. So if I look at this column, column J, and I call it as org 1 or company 1,
Yeah.
right? If I can type. So that company 1 will think about event as something that is occurring, has to occur against some sort of contractual agreement, which is manifested as arrangement. Then on that arrangement, it would need to have some sort of an group event. And group event is to your comment earlier about lines and headers
Okay.
and lines, right?
Okay. Okay.
So a group event is like an order. An order has a line item.
Yeah.
We call it as a subgroup event. And then that subgroup event has an actual event, because that line then gets distributed into other distributions. For example, if a line item is, let's say order consists of 5 things. The first thing is the line, but that first thing would have sales tax to it, would have shipping, might have a separate shipping attached to it.
Yeah.
So order is a collection of lines, and the lines are collection of the distributions that might apply that add up to that line, right?
Okay.
So an arrangement is the bearing of an event. Then it is followed up by multiple group events that might occur against an arrangement. Each group event will have subgroups and will have ultimately a lowest level of granularity of event line distribution.
So what is your order line item there at the bottom?
So this is the order line distribution actual specific identification. Meaning, imagine you have an order. So order has a number, right? So it has ID is identifier, right?
Yeah.
Then line is an identifier, because these are these are events that we need to identify uniquely and distinct and different from other events, right?
Yes. Yeah.
But line item, which is assigned to order line item, which is assigned to the lowest level, is the event code. Event code, what type of event it is.
It's a relationship to a code structure.
Yeah, so we say it's order line distribution type code.
Okay.
So what it does is it defines a category for the lowest level of granularity.
Yeah. Okay. So, and your point is that
Shipping. It is a distribution of type goods and services. It is. I mean, what is the type that line is made up of, so that later on it helps in various event processing models, which depend on that type to process it appropriately, whether it is accounting or it is something else.
okay. So this you have a breakdown going on here between row 19 and 20, and 18, 19, and 20 are getting more and more granular. When you get to 21, it's not necessarily becoming more granular. It's representing a relationship to
Yes.
a code structure.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
This is basically the way I look at it. Is this all of these things are now required on the event record?
Yep.
You would need a arrangement identifier. You would need a order or a group event identifier. You'll need a subgroup event identifier. Then you'll need a distribution line
Okay.
identifier, and then a category of that particular line to be of what type of line it is.
That's good. I don't see anything wrong with that. Rakesh, it's interesting that you came up with that independent of my header line concept.
Yeah,
So
because I've been dealing with this problem for last 6 months.
yeah, and that's kind of what I thought about that header line concept. This just naturally occurs in business all over the place. So why not just recognize it straight up front?
Exactly. So now hey Mike, can you see the screen?
I can see the screen. Can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, yeah.
So we were kind of starting to talk about the first step that we have to do is conceptually agree on what kind of structures we need in our system. And that will be the first exercise that we'll do. And we started to talk about the REA model, which is the resource, event, and agent. And we started looking at the event model, and we talked about an event must have a reference to the contract against which that event is happening. Then it must have, that arrangement might have multiple events against it. We need to have the group event identifier. It need to have subgroup event identifier. It need to have event ID and event code. And what that means is, for an arrangement, a group event might mean an order. A subgroup event might mean the line item of that order. The event itself, which is the lowest granularity, will mean the breakup of that line into multiple parts, such as sales tax or shipping and so on and so forth, that make up totals up to one line, and multiple lines total up to one order, and multiple orders are placed against an arrangement. And that is truly what the business world deals with on a day-to-day basis. Okay.
That makes sense.
So we are on the same page. Now I want to kind of switch over to duality, because this is where we are talking about sharing. So if you think about this event that is happening in company one, what would it look like from a perspective of company two? So if I go...
Actually, and Rakesh, can you increase the magnification a little bit? My
Sure.
age, there we go. Thank you.
So now, as I was kind of doing this from a concept of event, from a concept of company one, because I am within company one and thinking about what my arrangement will look like, what my orders are going to look like, and so on and so forth. But if you go look at from another company point of view, it's the same information, then you would have the same concept, but in order to distinguish between from company one to company two, we're going to call it a company two arrangement or counterparty arrangement in the counterparty world, or however we want to kind of we can say this is company two arrangement or company two arrangement or counterparty. I chose the word of counterparty, right?
That's fine. Yep.
So similarly, in order for order and group event of type order to happen, hey Deva, please. In order for a group event of order to occur in company one, we would need to have a complementary event on the company two side, because if this is an order for counterparty company two, then there needs to be an equal and satisfying the duality principle happening in company two as well. So we would call that as a counterparty group event ID. The code might be ultimately different, because this is maybe a purchase order for one, but it will be the sales order for the other.
But Rakesh, so on my chart, I would have had company one and company two in column L, and between the two of them, I would have recognized some portion where they have agreed to share code
Yes.
and data between the two of them.
Yes, I agree, and we can do that. First, we are identifying fields that will come into play, and then we'll identify the values, and then we identify, in the case of an event, even though the values are agreed, those values could be different for the same event in the dual fashion across the two companies.
Yes, they will be interpreted differently for the two companies, but they will agree. Yeah.
They'll come out of the same reference data set. Agreed.
No. Let's be a little bit more. Let's be a bit more fine in that distinction, right? There is a. I would anticipate there would be at least one shared value that will be recognized as a shared value between the two of them, and that is probably an amount field that they've agreed for payment. There won't be any, there has to be something to have it make sense to have a shared ledger.
Right.
You have to have something that you do share untranslated between the two parties.
Agreed. Agreed. So I'm going to park this question here. What binds / defines the duality?
So just an example comes to mind, right? When you're ordering a part from Amazon, Amazon presents you with the SKU and you agree to buy the SKU.
Right.
Right.
Right. Agreed. 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 So I'm going to come to that in a second, but I'm going to parking this question
Fine.
right here. Right now, what we are laying down is we sort of agree that an event must have at least these fields or these types of information,
Yep.
and they will exist or should exist in some form on the counterparty, the company that we are doing this event with or for. The same information must occur on the other side, even though the values might be different, but the fields would have to be similar. Correct?
Yep. Sounds good.
Let's talk about that, the sharing of the resources. So this was the event information. So sharing of the resource.
So can I go back to duality for a moment though? So you took duality to mean between the party and counterparty as a form of duality.
Right. Because sharing is sharing, the way the sharing in the REA model is described. It is because we are doing the events which are necessarily exactly the same events manifested on the other side or impacting the other side. We both can benefit from having that common information shared.
Yes, I get that, but I think the duality concept, if I consider where it came from, Rakesh, it wasn't reflected in that because that's a later concept of sharing. The original point was to recognize within an organization a duality where there is every business event has a complementary business event. And it's shown up in the way the accounting model got developed with a debit credit. And so I'm kind of going back to, that example slide from the monograph of the purchase for raw materials and the cash disbursement. That's not necessarily a duality. So I'm willing to.
You're right. And that duality exists. That duality exists in the resources. You're absolutely correct. And here's what it means. Let's take the same example, company one.
Okay.
So company one, because this order is a, let's say, purchase order, right? So that company one has to, in some way, form on its event, need to document what the SKU number is, what the quantities are, what the rate is, what the product type it is, and on its in its dual form, it also, just a second, let me mark the boundary of it. So this is the boundary of mirror image of the first. Then it has to also then document the counterpart that it is exchanging, because every company is exchanging something for the other. So if I am
Wait a minute.
purchasing, sorry,
I need I need to understand a bit more. So you're saying that the SKU number, quantity, rate, product is equivalent to the event structure?
No. Event structure, an event which we described as arrangement, group event, subgroup event, event ID, needs to have pieces of information about resource being exchanged, and resource being exchanged occur in dual fashion, something that you are getting and something that you are giving.
Okay.
They all are part of the event record.
Okay, so those top 4 boxes you're saying is one side of the duality and the bottom. I'm not quite sure why you put the red line in there. I'm just wondering.
Yeah, because that's the okay. Let me do this thing.
What did that mean?
if this means resource, this means resources involved in this event.
Mhm.
The things that are above the red line are the resources that we are either giving or getting
Okay.
in exchange for the resources at the bottom, which we are either giving or getting.
Okay.
Okay. So for example, if I'm getting nails, 20 nails at the rate of 1 cent with a SKU number of this, right? Then I need to give up a product of currency or USD check, which has a check number of 234, quantity of $2, with a uh, financial arrangement with Bank of America of a rate 1. So rate times quantity in a check with a check number is in exchange for this red line mirror image resource that I just got from my company too, or from my counterparty.
Okay. So why would, if let's go to a more simple system instead of a currency-based system to a barter-based system.
Yep.
In bartering, why wouldn't it be the 4 top boxes are replicated as the 4 bottom boxes?
Those would have been that's where I started from, and that was easy to kind of logically understand, but practically, one side of it is generally always a they're exactly the same thing. It just let me do it same way. So I'm going to put it.
I think the point is generalized because I was imagining where it was cash and cash on both sides, or some, like some of the trading type activities.
Yeah, this is exactly how.
You built it up, but you went to,
This
so
is an inventory example.
yeah.
So
So visually, I guess, Rakesh, I can understand that you started with the top 4 boxes were on the bottom 4. It would be helpful if the naming of those.
if I do it like this, that we have nails, 20 nails at 10 cents a piece, which have a SKU number of this, and at the bottom we have a rate of 1, not financial arrangement, sorry, same values. The SKU number is USD currency, quantity is 2, rate is 1, and product is product is currency, and SKU number is USD. I'm just making it up as we go.
That's good. It's good.
That makes more sense.
Oh, part of my problem, Rakesh, is I was looking at the arrangement and arrangement ID fields. I thought there were 6 below the line and 4 above the line.
There were 6. There were 6 before, but that's just learning over the time that whenever we talk about the resources, financial resources, in the context of an existing arrangement activity, that financial resources are generally attached to a financial arrangement that needs to be part and parcel of where this money resource is coming from, for identifying where it is coming from. But that's a we'll come to that bridge when we'll cross that bridge when we come there.
Okay, well, I'm ready to cross it. So
No,
you're gonna, but I'm interested why you don't have 2 extra boxes on the top and 2 extra boxes on the bottom, right? For a generalized.
What do you mean 2 extra boxes at the top?
Where you had 6 boxes below the line originally. You've gone backwards in your thinking to try to help us come along with where you've gone.
Yeah, because the equivalent of arrangement and an equivalent of arrangement event ID is already identified as part of the event. The one side, the 2 fields are already on this event record. One is identified by the event ID itself.
Yes.
And the second is the arrangement that this event is modifying or creating is applicable to. So those 2 are already on the event record.
Okay. So you don't have to reflect them on the resource side of things because it's reflected in the event side.
Right. But if this is easier to understand, then that's what we should go with.
Well, no, that's okay. That's a good question. So those terms do look inventory-ish, right? You wouldn't think that they were financial terms. The example you've given there is exactly right, below the line, of how that applies to. So I don't know if it might make it easier to make it a dual description, SKU number / currency.
I mean, and to Mike's point, both sides could be any types of resources,
Yes. Okay.
and it could be cash, it could be goods for cash, it could be goods for services, services for goods, and
Yep. Okay.
right? So
Convinced
this general description is good. I just would have wherever we have this event, maybe then I will add like we have arrangement here, I would have a mirror image of financial arrangement that might be involved in the event, in this event itself. Because once we are saying that we're going to pay you, we also know where we are going to pay it from. Maybe this is an event-to-event relationship later on. So let's just kind of move from this point, right?
Okay.
Okay. So now the same question applies. Now we have the mirror image of.
No, that last point you just made, though, that's important, because where you just went to, I think, is you just started to talk about duality reflected in the event, right?
Duality
Of the exchange.
yes. So then the question will become whether the dual nature of the attributes should go on the payment event or the other event, and these two should be related in a duality fashion.
Yeah, okay, I'm following.
Right? I was trying to put it all into one and trying to kind of make it dual across to the counterparty. But another, and again, this is why we need to have a conceptual conversation first, because we arrive at the good answers right up front, so we don't have to keep going back to the same work again and again. I mean, one option we are realizing right now is it could be one event that will have the event as well as the resources as well as the agents all on that one event, versus we'll have two events. One will be the dual image of the other, and they would be related in that dual relationship on one company's side, and then mirrored across on the other company side.
Yeah, and if it's and one of the key questions I think you're getting at there is whether we think the term is really duality in that two is important, or is it multiplicity? Because it's if it's multiplicity, then you don't want to try to represent that in just a dual relationship. You want to open up multiple, and I don't know what the answer to that is.
Right. Okay. So now we know that we have event. That event then involves exchange of resources, right, on one side to the other. And then let's now look at the agents. Agents are pretty simple. We have the responsible party, which is responsible for this event, which is basically the primary party, and then there's a counterparty to this arrangement which is engaged in this, and that is the arrangement counterparty. And let's say it was Home Depot that we went to buy the nails. Then for this company, we are the arrangement responsible party, and Home Depot is the arrangement counterparty. Those are the two agents that are involved in this particular transaction, this particular event.
Yep. So I think you want to move that K column field over one.
Yeah.
But again, the question gets raised there for multi-party transactions, right?
Right, and it could be that we can have multiple parties agent in here, and they will play just different roles. Like we have a role here of a responsible party and a counterparty. It could be counterparty in a role relationship of 20% counterparty versus 40% counterparty, and there could be different roles that we can kind of come in with different. So agents could be multiple. They are related to the events. They could be on the event record itself, or they could be through a relationship record to an involved party with a role as a discriminator between them.
Yes. Yeah. So can we take a step back for just a moment and reflect here? It seems to me, Rakesh, if I think about our call on Monday and where we started in that, and you were thinking here, this seems to be a productive line of reasoning. This is driving us forward in some thinking processes.
Yep, exactly. Because ultimately what we'll need to do is we need to define these attributes into the FPM metadata, create structures out of it, right?
So let's talk about that for just a minute, how far down the road we have to go on that. My impression is that the thing we have to get right is the keys to the entities and, you know, a few other fields that are completely defined. If this is helpful for a moment, Rakesh, if I go back to the vision statement that I just laid out a moment ago, right?
Right.
My vision statement started with small businesses and individuals as trying to accommodate both them and scale to large individuals. If I think of presenting somebody FPEM-like environment for their personal finances, listen, when it comes to like Mint as an example, there's the chart of account is composed of a single field called category, right? That's it. So
I don't understand that. Why chart of account is a single field?
for an individual, the chart of account may be as simple as a single field, just something called category.
Yeah, it is a single. I mean, no matter how complex the business is, it is a single field always. It is an account that has either 10,000 entries or has only 5 entries.
My point is that as an individual, I don't need cost centers. I don't need products. I don't need all the other.
I got it.
There's a bunch of complexity in the data models we're using for very large organizations that aren't needed in the simple organizations. We're not going to fit that complexity into a single model, but that's okay. My point being that that having variability on the record structures for different types of organizations is okay. What we'd like to get right is the major entities involved and the keys to those entities and a few other fields, that we get consistency in those things.
Yeah, and the process that we have evolved to for implementation at FPM, doing a couple of them. And again, this is a learning process. We start with conceptual, have this kind of conversation and thought process, right? Through that thought process, we define those structures and fields that are necessary that we discussed during the conceptual. Then we come to its physical, and physical meaning we look at the same things and we make decisions around what kind of a date treatment we need to have, what is the natural key for that, how it would join, all of those conversations. So it's a stepwise progression. Focusing on data means we first understand conceptually what structures we need, what information we need as fields on them, and then we go and define the uniqueness and keys and all natural keys and all of that before we put it into the platform. Because once we put it into the platform, there's a lot of work to go change and so on and so forth.
So good. So an idea comes from, for me, we could modify the next POC definition for myself. I have financial data that goes back to 1996.
Right.
I would like, and it's personal, so it's fairly simple, but it does have multiple accounts. I even do multi-currency in some of those accounts, right?
Right.
So I'd love to have access to an FPEM environment where I can test.
You can sign up yourself.
Yeah.
It is open for business. but I still I think I see your excitement to go into the kind of FP and start kind of writing these things. But I still think you would need to think thoroughly in terms of what conceptual model you need, what physical model you need before you put it into the tool. Because once you put it into the tool, it becomes very time consuming to go modify and change and so on and so forth.
No, let me reassure you on that point, that I recognize the importance of that point, because you saw it in me on the Virginia data POC.
Right, right.
My definition of arrangements were not very clear.
And it kind of keeps going on once you define the platform structures in terms of what do you need in terms of event and journals and so on and so forth. Then you will spend even more time in defining the accounting of it as well, because it involves a lot of thought process in there too.
Yeah.
And that is where most of the time is spent, and that is an IP. That is an IP that I believe you should be kind of grabbing onto, because that IP is what is enabling the sharing of things or defining the things in a way that will be conducive to that.
Yep, that's good. Actually, we've got about 5 minutes more in our conversation today.
Sure.
You've certainly got more here for us to continue this conversation. And
my principle, I know you told me about Jeff's principle. My principle is, let's start doing it and things will figure out for themselves.
yeah, no, there's a bias towards action is a very good way of managing your life.
I think we need to also kind of at some point define, like, the reason I had this conversation, so I can kind of get the path forward in front of everyone. The question is what we need to kind of have roles assigned to people to go, so that we can make parallel progress as opposed to single threaded progress.
Oh, I'd love to have parallel progress. That would be wonderful.
Okay, so I think from today, what I'll do is I'll send you this, I share this common sheet, which I generally use just for the purposes of straightening out my thought, and you can start jotting down and it will be shared in an area that will probably be open source area, right? So this would become open source.
Yep.
And then Mike, if you can just get familiar with FPEM in terms of just logging in or signing up, and I can spend 15-20 minutes with you to kind of walk you through different parts and pieces and how we thought about it versus how HSBC had. And 90% is similar, it's just slightly different here and there. And then you can probably then start helping out in terms of configuration once Kip finishes his thoughts around what the conceptual model is or the physical model should be, and so on and so forth. Configuring on it could be a joint effort across all of us.
Excellent.
Yeah, if there's something you want me to look at, or you said even sign up, send me that information and I'll do that.
Sure. And what I'll do is I'll call you after 5 minutes after the call finishes, and then I'll walk you through that process. It shouldn't take more than 15 minutes.
Okay, so I propose maybe we get together on Monday again.
Sure.
That'd be okay, Mike?
That'd be okay. And hopefully you would have thought through in terms of conceptually, at least we can agree on this would be a good model to have for enabling sharing. And I think the real important question, which I haven't got to yet, is even if we define all of this thing, what would be open to sharing is a hypothesis that we need to get to and agree to.
Well, so, and yeah, let's go there. And maybe the point would be, you're sharing this spreadsheet. The data model is something we would want to make open source. Maybe that is the point of
Right. I mean, when I said sharing, I didn't mean data open source amongst ourselves. When the system is functional and implemented and ready for different parties to come and use the system, what would be the sharing is something that we haven't agreed on or we haven't thought through.
Yep.
That's an important question. If we are sharealedger.com, we need to be very clear in terms of what is exactly parties sharing.
Good. So my focus then, Rakesh, is taking what you've done here and making sure I can understand that, and maybe thinking about thoughts about how would I reflect that column between the two,
right,
as to what goes in that column about what is shared between the organizations.